joining us right now to get more into the NFL conversation. Week 1 of the NFL season. It is officially 1 hour and 58 minutes from kickoff of the NFL season. It's a beautiful time of year, and to get more into it is the friend of the show, the one and only, Andy McNamara from Sportsnet, proudly sporting his Browns gear. If you're watching on @973 ESPN on YouTube, Twitter, and whose signature is that on the jersey?
Well, so I have my vintage 1980 Cardiac Kids. It's not from 1980. It's a replica. It was 1 year before I was born. Brian Sipe jersey signed by Cleveland Browns owner Jimmy Haslam.
Oh,
it's a bit of an odd signature. So yeah, there you go.
I mean, listen. I mean, to get the jersey signed by, if you're going to get a random signature, it might as well be the owner, right? Like,
right?
It's not like you got like the former GM or somebody signing the jersey. You know what I mean?
I got the money man.
It's not like you got like the 20 GMs or the 20 head coaches who have ran through Cleveland over the last 2 decades, right?
Oh, no kidding. No, we're looking, guys. See, you got your Rock shirt on too. You just bring it.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's what tonight's about. That's what the season's about, Josh, right? It's just bring it. Let's go.
Absolutely. And so before we get into anything else, we got to get to the breaking news that happened about a couple hours ago. Gus Edwards looks like his season is done. Marcus Peters looks like his season is done. They both tore their knees at practice, it looks like. And I said before you came on, I didn't say it just because you're coming on, the Ravens cannot win the division now. I'm telling everybody right now, this is the Browns and the Steelers down the stretch, because there's no way that any combination of Le'Veon Bell, Devonta Freeman, and maybe Latavius Murray are going to make up for J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Plus, don't forget, Marcus Peters was arguably their best cornerback. So you're losing offense and defense. And from a fantasy football angle, you all going to want to go grab Devonta Freeman and Le'Veon Bell right now off of waivers, because you know what?
Oh, yeah.
They might not be great, but they're going to have to get touches, because who else is there, Andy?
Right. Someone's got to touch it. And the thing is, Josh, I'm not as – now, unless I hope you're right. I hope it is the Browns division. Don't get me wrong. I'm all in. I believe. However, we have to remember that it's all about Lamar Jackson anyway. Like, J.K. Dobbins, heck of a talent. Absolutely. But it still goes through Lamar. And I wonder if they can get by in some sort of hodgepodge committee role, keep guys fresh in a rotation in, because Lamar Jackson is the one that is going to be the playmaker, and they are going to live or die with that regardless of who's in the backfield. So while you never want to see anybody, no matter what team, get the torn ACL, to me it didn't really change what I thought about the Ravens going in, because it's still about Lamar.
Listen, I'm not saying Lamar can't have a great year. I'm just saying that when you lose that many guys to injuries,
right,
I just feel like you're running out of ammunition. Like,
right,
the Ravens can still be a wild card team, but be nowhere near the division. You know what I mean? Like, you could have a team like the Ravens. If the Ravens go 9-8 or 10-7 and still make the postseason, but the team that wins the division, whether it's the Browns or the Steelers, have 12, 13 wins, that's a 3-game difference.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah. And it's so much about health, and you just, it's so odd, right? Like, sometimes just injuries flood in. Like, why another ACL with the Ravens? It's not like you can, I wouldn't think that they're doing extra strenuous stuff to hurt ACLs. Like, it's just so strange how that happens. But yeah, they're down to just a bunch of guys in the backfield and run it through Lamar. And that's why I think it's going to be more pressure. I think we're going to see more Lamar action. And as defenses keep evolving, developing, defensive coordinators in the National Football League, folks, believe it or not, are pretty smart. They have a lot of game tape now on Lamar Jackson. They know you want him to throw the ball. So if you keep him scrambling, start hitting him around a little bit, that Ravens team, if Lamar goes down, boy, that's, they're going to be battling for the basement with the Bengals.
Now, the other news that came down today, also in the AFC North, TJ Watt got his contract, $80 million guaranteed. But Andy, the two parts of his story are not a coincidence to me. It's not a coincidence that yesterday Roethlisberger gets in front of the media and says, I didn't take a pay cut for these guys not to get paid, saying that TJ Watt is the best football player in the league, which we all know is not true. It's actually Aaron Donald, but I digress. Still, for Roethlisberger to say that, then today the report comes down from Schefter that TJ Watt overruled his agents, marched into Art Rooney's office and told him they're going to make a deal, then excused himself to go work out. I mean, the Steelers are looking like a team that's going to rally the horses, as Chris Berman used to say.
Right. Yeah. You love to see teams have each other's back, right? Especially going into the year. TJ Watt's a heck of a player. Let's not kid around about that. Watt family's ridiculous. But I think when you look at the Steelers as a whole, they're not going to be starting the year 11-0 like they were a year ago. This is going to have to be a grinded out, physical team. I think is going to win a lot ugly. Ben's arm, could start well like it did last year and wear itself down. We've talked about it before on the show. 4 new offensive linemen, and you didn't necessarily get better with those linemen. So your old quarterback needs protecting. Your rookie running back, I love Najee Harris coming out of college, but with that offensive line, how is that going to progress? How is that going to look? Are the holes going to be able to be there for Harris to do something, or is it going to force them to be one-dimensional and throw the ball a million times, and then they'll regress like last year? That's what's going to be so fascinating. The defense is going to keep them in ball games, and we'll have to see what old man Roethlisberger can drum up and keep going through a full 17, an extra regular season game with that elbow now.
Well, he certainly looks like he's in better shape than the last few years. Last few years, he was turning into Pillsbury Doughboy. Now he looks like an actual athlete.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's like, oh yeah, he looks good. It's like, well, he looked really bad before.
Correct.
You have somebody who's overweight, and it's easy to lose that first 10 pounds, right? Like, you look great. It's like, yeah, well, you look pretty bad before, right? It's not like we're talking about Tom Brady, who was like fit, and it's like now he somehow looks even better. Like, stop it, Tom. It's ridiculous.
Tom's a genetic anomaly at this point.
Yeah.
By the way, the Steelers, you mentioned, the Steelers rebuilt their offensive line. The Ravens rebuilt their offensive line.
Yeah.
The Kansas City Chiefs rebuilt their offensive line. The Chargers have rebuilt their offensive line. So of those 4 AFC teams, who do you believe in more after rebuilding their offensive line?
I think it's the Chiefs, because it was the sole focus of their offseason. While it was a main focus for others, it was, look, we have to make sure we look no further than the Super Bowl, the last memory. What was it? Like, Patrick Mahomes ran 400 yards sideways or backwards, that graphic that we saw, like the zippies, like a toddler with a crayon running around. They had to fix it. So you take arguably the best offense in the whole league, and you upgrade that offensive line. Makes a ton of sense to do. So I think it benefits the Chiefs the most. But obviously, overall, it really depends on how you quantify upgrade. I don't think the Steelers upgraded. I think they got new guys. I think they have new bodies. I don't think they got better. I think the Chargers got better. Still some room for improvement, but I think they got better. The Chiefs really took the next step, I believe, to that offense. Because you don't even, with Patrick Mahomes back there, you don't even need, Josh, a great offensive line. You need a capable one, because Mahomes can do so much. You just don't want him getting smashed right away off the snap. You just need to give a little bit of time, and then he can do what he does.
Andy McNamara joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at AndyMC81 on Twitter. Give him a follow for all your fantasy sports and NFL insights. He joins us every Thursday here on 97.3 ESPN. Andy, obviously we have a game tonight. Cowboys, Bucks.
Woo.
And, first of all, I'll be completely transparent. I think the Bucks go nuts tonight. I think this is going to be a statement game for Tampa. And I think the Zach Martin not playing tonight is going to be a huge impact. And listen, for fantasy players, Dak's going to get his. Zeke's going to get his, right? Some of these guys, they're going to get theirs. But if the Bucks win 35-20, I'll be whatever less than not shocked is.
Exactly. Well, the over-under, I think, last time I checked, was set at 51.5. I'm smashing the over.
Yeah.
Smashing, Josh. Like that seems like easy money, the over 51.5, when you have two offenses. When Dak was playing last year, the first 5 games, I think they were averaging, 32.8 points a game? Like, come on. And the Bucks last year, over 30 points a game. It seems natural. I'll let you in on a little something that you and the listeners are going to like. So I drafted on one of my fantasy teams, one of my big money teams, Dak Prescott, and later in the draft, Jalen Hurts. Guess who I have in my starting lineup? I took Dak. I'm putting Dak on the bench, and I'm getting Hurts in there to play the Falcons. That's how much I agree with your take there. I think Dak is going to get his, but on a Thursday nighter, first game, Tampa Bay's defense, no joke. We all talk about Tom, no joke. Dak first game back off of that ankle. To me, fantasy thinking, since I have the option from two, I'll take the Eagles and Jalen versus Atlanta, who I don't know if they're retooling, rebuilding, whatever, on that one. So I'm going Jalen Hurts this week myself over Dak. That's my fantasy play.
Well, how about this? So I was just talking about this before you came on. We had Brian Baldinger on 97.3 ESPN yesterday. He thinks that the Eagles are going to run over the Falcons' defense because of their offensive line. And Tony Romo, in an interview with CBSSports.com, said that he thinks the Eagles can win 10 games because of their offensive line this year. So that's not one, but two pretty high-profile guys complimenting the offensive side of the Eagles' ball, which buys into what you said about Jalen Hurts.
And we just talked about the importance of offensive line, especially when it comes to a young quarterback who's going to be developing and learning on the job, right? Now, we've talked about it multiple times, Josh, and I believe we are going to be proven to be very smart at the end of this season when it comes to Jalen Hurts and his arm talent. Everyone talks about the legs, and he can run, but he doesn't take sacks, at least he didn't last year, throws it away. He's going to be more accurate. And if that completion percentage is a little low, well, you know what? That's fine because he's not getting his butt put on the grass because he's throwing it away. And that offensive line is going to allow him that option with the fact that teams just based, like if you look at the Eagles offense overall, there's not necessarily, I know Devonta Smith is the shiny new toy, but there's not necessarily that one like Tyreek Hill, like, ooh. However, you have enough pieces that defenses are going to have to respect it. You have to respect Goddard and Ertz and Smith and all the other pieces that are around there. Plus, in the backfield, that Miles Sanders and especially Kenneth Gainwell, who I love as a rookie, Boston Scott mixed in there too. But all those together, while not necessarily having the super duper star with the legs of Hurts, I think are going to have to keep defenses honest because you can't stack the box, you can't double team because you don't really know how the ball is going to be distributed, which I think is important.
All right, let's run through some players who have been in the news this week ahead of week one. Obviously, if you got the Bucks and Cowboys on your rosters, you want to get some of those guys in tonight, depending on who you have options for. Let's run down some names here. I'll start with Odell Beckham Jr. Obviously, he's coming off the injury last year. I know for my fantasy draft last night, I purposely drafted Jarvis Landry instead of OBJ because I felt more comfortable with Landry getting more playing time, at least early on, than OBJ. What is your thoughts on Odell?
Very smart. I'm on the same mindset, Josh. Now, does Odell fantasy-wise have a higher ceiling game in, game out? Yes. But you look at what he's done since he's been in Cleveland, and really since, 2016? He hasn't done much, whether that's based on injury, circumstance, whatever. Jarvis Landry, especially in PPR, is a catch machine. Moves the chains. He's not going to break one. But if you have Jarvis as, let's say, if it's a 3 wide receiver league and you have him as your 3, or in 2 you have him as a flex option, I think you're in good shape. And he gives you the higher floor. He's not going to give you the bust-out games, but he's going to give you the safer floor. Where Odell, while he's been looking great in practice, that's cool. How does it work? Is that chemistry finally going to be there with Baker where it has not been so far with his time in Cleveland?
Let's go to the Giants offense. Jason Garrett said this week that they are going to be specific and purposeful, quote unquote, with how they use Kadarius Toney. We also know that Saquon Barkley is coming off of his injury. Are you steering clear of Giants offensive players in week one?
Can I pick for the whole year, Josh?
Well, last week you said you wouldn't draft anybody from the Texans, so you can't bail on 2 complete NFL teams.
I stick with my Texans comment. I jest a bit with the Giants. But the thing is, there's so many questions, right? Like Saquon, when he's on, could be the best in the business. We know that. But is he going to be on? And that's why in fantasy drafts, you saw him, his ADP was around the 9-10 spot. because when you got to that point, it's like, okay, well, do I chance it? What does being purposeful, what does being careful mean for week 1? What does it mean for week 2? What if he gets a little tweak? How does that work, right? And so you can't rely on the tight ends. Daniel Jones has legs. So in a 2 QB league, you could talk me into Daniel Jones as your second for maybe garbage time points too, and that he can move. But overall for the Giants, it's a case where I'd want it. Let's say this. You have usable fantasy pieces. I wouldn't want to rely on any as my top dog at a position. I think that's probably fair. Saquon could do it. Like he could come back. I hope he proves us wrong. Exciting player. But he has to show us he can do it, because 2 years in a row, that's too much for me.
Curtis Samuel is still sidelined with the groin. Any injuries about him in Washington?
Well, Curtis Samuel in Washington this year as a whole is fun to think of. It is a little dangerous, I think, until we see how he's used. Now, maybe that injury allows other people to progress and sort of get into some sort of pattern, so we know how that's going to go. Like Curtis Samuel, because you could line him up in the backfield, because you can slide him out. College teammates with Terry McLaurin, right? Does Rivera look to use them sort of as Ohio State did, where you had Samuel as a bit of a gadget guy all over the place? What does that mean for Antonio Gibson, who still is learning on the job to be a running back when he was primarily a receiver, sort of an in-between? So what do all those different pieces that can do so much, how do they fall into place? That's really what we need to see. So I at least hope if Samuel does miss some time, we're able to figure out a little bit, okay, how are these other players being used? And then when Samuel gets in, develop that. Like Samuel's somebody I want on my fantasy team, but I want to have him on my bench to start and sort of take a step back and just view how it develops.
Is DeAndre Swift also a guy you want to start on the bench to start the year, considering he's coming off of an injury and they're playing the 49ers in week 1?
You know what? I want DeAndre Swift in there. I'm in, Josh. I'm all in. I want him. I want all the shares of Swift. I believe that he, out of last year, him and Jonathan Taylor were the 1A, 1B running backs. He was obviously just handcuffed with the disastrous coaching job of Matt Patricia. Just disgusting. So now you have an old school guy, Jason Campbell. He talks about biting people's knees and hitting people. I don't know. Great wrestling promo. But so with that, even against the San Francisco defense, I think we have to think of who the quarterback is now. If it was Matthew Stafford, I might agree. But with Jared Goff, it's going to be TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift's world in fantasy. These receivers, they're all just guys. So the 49ers defense is formidable. But if I drafted DeAndre Swift, I want him in my lineup. I think he's going to get a lot of touches. I think he's an underrated pass catcher. And I think he can pass protect if needed as well. And Jared Goff, that quick dink and dunk style. Who's that going to benefit? Ball quick out of your hands. 49ers pass rush coming. Hey, DeAndre, pop. Hey, Hawkinson, pop. You're not going to be going deep. So I think he's still relevant.
Austin Eckler, 2 straight days of DNPs at practice. How concerned are you, and are you advising people to go get some handcuffs?
Yeah, I would. And also for this week, like this is tough. I actually had a question on Twitter. And folks, you can use hashtag AskAndy as well, at AndyMC81, get the fantasy questions, about a Ronald Jones or Austin Eckler. Because, of course, Thursday you can have a guy that you know is going to play tonight, or maybe with Austin Eckler. And with being held out 2 days, and even if he does play, is he going to be limited for week 1? I'm not saying go out and do something crazy like drop or trade Austin Eckler. He's still the guy. But if you have a choice of, let's say, a Fournette or a Jones tonight, and you're a little iffy on Eckler, I would make that move, or I would maybe try to get somebody else in that roster spot instead of Eckler for this week. Because the worst thing, of course, is you wait. And Sunday comes, and then it's like, oh, he's not playing, or he's limited, right? So I think I'd go in a different direction if I could. So, but Josh, it's a case where running backs are so thin, you might not have a choice but to roll with them.
Hey, listen, man, I had the second to last pick in the first round of my draft last night, and running back became a dicey situation for me, to the point where I was fortunate to get Raheem Mostert in the later rounds, but I also settled on Tevin Coleman in the later rounds. So it's like, if you don't get the right spot in your draft and you're ready to play out the right way, running back becomes dicey. And if you're somebody who took a top 5 pick on Austin Eckler and now you're sitting around like, I don't know what to do, you got to make some tough decisions right now. And I think that's where week 1 is interesting because on one hand, you got tough decisions. On the other hand, some of these situations at running back, we don't know what's going on. Like you talk about numerous times about the Patriots. I've been telling people the moment they picked up Malcolm Perry, I said stay away from the Patriots running backs for the rest of the year. Not because Rex Burkhead is quote unquote going to come in there and steal the show, but because I could totally see Perry running a wildcat at some point this year and turning James White completely obsolete for 2 weeks.
The Patriots, it's frustrating because the talent of like Damian Harris is, it's great. And James White, we know what White is, right? But to your point, Belichick does weird stuff, right? Is this Perry guy going to be the next Burkhead, right? Like how is that?
Andy, he was the Navy quarterback. And where did Belichick's dad coach at? Annapolis. You know, Belichick loves those military guys. You know they picked him off of waivers, not just because they're playing the Dolphins this week, but because Belichick loves having those guys around, set the standard, blah, 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 Pat's culture.
No, you're so right. And does that get rewarded with some workload? That's why I never value any Patriots running back higher than an RB2. Like in any other situation, Damian Harris could be a full-fledged starter, but I don't think you can because we don't know. Belichick doesn't care about our fantasy football team, folks. He does. I'm sorry. Neither does Sean Payton. I got the stress ball ready, too, in case you ask me Taysom Hill questions. Get ready for that. But no, you're right. It is very tough to trust the Patriots backfield.
All right, Andy, before I let you go, tell folks how they can get their hands on Madden 22.
Ooh, baby. Yeah, I'm giving away a copy of EA Sports Madden 22. So what you're going to want to do is to help promote the next league that's coming up, Josh, in my UFF Sports. It's the American Football Legends League, where our legends come back to life, where Chris Carter is going to be playing game simulation. It's going to be nuts. Lots to come there. But to enter to win the EA Sports Madden 22, you're going to have to follow on Twitter at the AFLL, on Twitter. You'll see it right there. Follow along, retweet, follow the directions, and you get a chance to win Madden.
And you should also be following at AndyMC81 for all of your fantasy sports and NFL analysis all year long. He'll be back with us every Thursday throughout the football season. We'll talk fantasy football, NFL, and whatever else comes up in our conversations here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Andy, you knocked it out of the park again, my friend.
Oh, thanks, brother. Listen, everybody, it's the beginning of football season. Enjoy it. Go Eagles. Go Browns.
Take care, Andy.
See you, buddy.
And, of course, Andy McNamara's appearance here being brought to you by Jim Malamut at Green Tree Mortgage, your best play to refinance today. Yes, every Thursday's fantasy football talk with Sportsnet's Andy McNamara on 97.3 ESPN. We'll talk with Andy every single week about fantasy football and the NFL, and he's brought to you each week by Jim Malamut at Green Tree Mortgage, your best play to refinance today.